All right, this is Saturday, March 16th, and it's just a little bit after 7:30 in the morning here on the west coast of the US of A, of Turtle Island, of this land rife with unceded territory that we have taken, we the white colonizers. And I am deeply grateful that I am allowed to live here in this place, and I'm in the midst of a process that will perhaps be lifelong of how to possibly mitigate that thievery, that unresolved taking of land. So that's my little riff for the day. This is, of course, book club in from Living Resilience, and we're in our seventh of 9 sessions of poet Mark Nepo's book, Surviving Storms. And we're down to two of us. I know that Judy is only gone because she's on a retreat where she evidently has not found a good way to connect with us this morning with that retreat. She will listen to the recording. So, hi, Judy, if you're listening to this in some nearby future. And that leaves Bob and myself. And so we are here. We're holding the flame of this exploration. And I think the next thing I'd like to ask us to do is if we would both just briefly check in to get ourselves more present here and perhaps more aligned with the material, because I know I've had a few other things going on already this morning. So I'm curious, Bob, would you like to just check in for a few moments?
Uh, Not much else is going on. My biopsy came back negative for cancer this time. It was cancer the previous time, but this time it was just pre-cancer. So I'm happy about that. And like you said, just there's so much going on outside of ourselves. Uh, Trying to stay calm and stay centered is pretty tough, you know,
Yeah.
pretty tough. But that's about all I'm going to throw in right now. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, my heart goes out to you about having somewhat better news than full on cancer diagnosis, instead precancerous. That's about as far as I've gotten in terms of the approach to cancer at any given time, and that got taken care of about 2 years ago. And I'm hoping that's it for my dancing with pre-cancer or anything remotely like it. So my best wishes to you in that. Go keep on going in a good way for you. And thanks for sharing that. Yeah, this world is breathtaking. What's going on? And I'm just going to slow down a little bit, as you're probably used to me doing by now. Slowing down in order to feel just a little bit deeper and in order to be present uh, just a little bit more than if I'm speaking more rapidly, if I'm going from topic to topic quickly and so on. There's less depth, there's less real connection with the message that I'm trying to convey. So I think I'm gonna in terms of this check-in, I'm gonna also sort of announce to anybody who might be watching this recording that Living Resilience is more than just a book club and more than just a Mighty Networks community space on the interwebs. There are a lot of courses, there are a lot of support groups or special focus groups and so on. And I got to say, offering this work, and especially at this time, I'm checking in with some frustration, some sadness, some confusion, of what exactly is going on with our collective attention. It seems like uh, the constant supply of way too much content all the time and everything going faster and faster and just uh, at an exponential level of increase. I'm hard pressed to really understand what our society is trying to do with itself, and what individuals that I know an awful lot of people who are very bright and very committed and want good things for themselves, their families, their communities, and so on. Good people, and most of us are, to some degree or another, really addicted to that massive quantity and acceleration of content all the time. I call it the fire hose to the face of content. And there's no way we can metabolize it. We can't even hope to get any of it in really in our mouths when it's coming at us like that intensity. And and the thing I've noticed, Bob, is this book, this work of Mark Nepo. I knew him as a poet from my brief work with Francis Weller, who includes Mark Nepo in every one of his grief rituals. um, I'm familiar now enough with Mark Nepo's work to know that he's a person doing soul work. I mean, talking about soul work. And I find myself having to slow down to match his pace. I love listening to him read his own book. So anybody, again, who's listening to the recording, if you are reading the book and if you seem suited to somehow listen to the book, he, of course, reads his own book. This is soul work going on. And I think it's more needed than it's ever been, especially at a global scale right now. And I don't know how to get the word out. I don't know how to speak to the public listening, even with friends, very dear friends who I invited to be in this book club because I knew that this soul work was coming. And it was amazing to me, like they would just hear the word poet with the guy's name and whom they never heard of. And they said, I'm not really into poetry. Yeah, I don't want to do it this time. So see ya. Have a good time. Enjoy. And I don't mean to judge. I don't mean to cast aspersions. It's just confusing to me. I don't know how to communicate some of the beauty that I find in this work. That chapter to bridge out to maybe getting us going instead of me pretending like I'm checking in still. The perennial choices, which in our session 7 revised content that's suggested to be reading for this time, perennial choices is kind of in the middle of the stack. And you were mentioning that you didn't get through all the reading, and
I did get through that one.
Good. Yay. All right. Well, maybe we can just have that be our focus today. I don't know. And we don't have
That's fine. I mean, I've got more notes on that chapter than probably just about any of the others, except
Yeah.
the striving one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last time that we didn't get finished.
Yeah.
Or staying and returning, excuse me.
Yeah.
Straying and returning. I think we could spend multiple chapters, multiple times on that one, and probably multiple ones on perennial choices also. But we'll do our best.
No, you just said it. You said a different one than perennial choices. What was the one you also added?
I said last time we didn't get to getting through the whole thing, the strain and returning.
Got it. Got it. I hear you. Okay. I thought you were pointing to something from this time and I couldn't find it in
No, that
yeah.
was last time, you know.
All
And
right. Well, it sounds like we might be on a similar wavelength here, and I want to be sure. Gosh, I wish Judy, I wish you were here to give us your usually evocative list of things that are important for you to cover this time. So I'm sorry we won't include that. Uh, and I'm just giving a quick look to the restorative nature of belief, which I have some real. I could talk with Mark Nepo for a while about my difficulty with the word belief and the whole concept of belief and how dangerous it is. I consider it to be a dangerous and not intentful way of operating our processing of the world, our thinking about the world, our motivating ourselves in the world. I do understand, and I believe I get what the essence of what he's after in it. But it's kind of like the word religion. You know, I know that good things have happened for people over the millennia of religion, and for the most part, I just hold established religion as something that's at best barely benign and has caused an awful lot of suffering in its own right. So, um,
yeah, barely benign is a good way of putting it.
um,
Good way of putting it.
yeah. So I actually it would be fine for us to just uh, perhaps we could just spend a minute in the thick of it because I've been hungry for Mark Nepo to include something about the predicament we're in. And so this is I think as close as he gets.
Okay, let me just make one statement about the restorative nature of belief. Um, to me, his main thrust there was that to have a belief or have faith, it must be bounded and tied to experience. That if you don't have faith in something or believe something that you have, if you have faith in something or believe something you have not experienced yourself, then you're living somebody else's belief. You're living somebody else's faith. You're not authentic to yourself.
Mhm.
And so that was the main thrust I got out of there. You cannot be you have to be sincere in your efforts. And if you're not sincere in trying to have a faith that experienced, then you're deceiving yourself. So that was the main thrust I got out of that chapter. So, okay.
There was one particular thing that I'm looking for in that brief chapter that I just would like to find and mention as you've just mentioned yours. All right. So there's a line here that I'll just read and then let's see if we can untangle it a little bit. I've come to understand belief as the animation of spirit by the life force that carries it. And the animation of spirit in the world is much more important than the conclusions of any believer or the worship of any object of belief. Yes. So, given that one phrase, I can walk with him all day on what he's saying about belief.
Yeah.
And, because all I've ever experienced in this lifetime is people bashing each other over the head with the conclusions of and the rigidity of their beliefs. And somehow they've been convinced that the only way to make their beliefs righteous is to convince others of those same beliefs. And that I find deeply offensive. And that was one of the few things that up until recently I was very hopeful and very proud of America's founding structures, including the Constitution, that we don't have to be subject to other people's beliefs. We don't have to. In fact, we have a foundation that's supposed to not allow religion to be a part of our governing forces. And so, yeah, I wanted to kind of stabilize what I was saying about Mark Nepo and what he was saying about belief with that one phrase. I'm in his camp. I'm totally with him.
Okay.
Anything else on that?
We can go to the next one if you want to try.
All right. The rush of life. Anything with that?
Yeah. The first quote that was in there, my understanding of what that quote really means to me. Here again.
Can I just read that for you real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
In our era, the road to holiness necessarily passes through the world of action. That's from Dag Hammarskjöld.
Right. And what that means to me is that in the world of action, unless you operate within and by an attendant consciousness of spirit from your soul, from a level of unity, you are necessarily operating at a level of separation. And separation necessarily defines loneliness.
Do you mind repeating that?
Well, that's just what I wrote when I was going through it. But basically, let me turn to the quote and then talking about loneliness, and everybody now seems to be lonely somehow. And I think they're lonely because of the separation that we exist in, the fact that we do not live from our soul by the spirit in a mode of unity with all other things, where we are automatically conscious and have identity with everything else. That separation that we live by causes the loneliness.
Yes.
So we're kind of stuck in it, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's hitting us when we started off our conversation this morning about,
right.
All this stuff trying to keep us separated from our true self, from our soul, from our understanding and experience of oneness, which I'm going to get to a little bit later, in especially in the chapter that we're going to concentrate on, I think, mostly. But that was the main thing I got. And then I did make a note here. This is funny. It said, if you are rushed, you're not quiet. And then right out beside it in parentheses, I said, Dean's slowing down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I think we're both pretty much on track with Mark Nepo, and also at a pace, both of us are appreciating the pace of trust, the pace of soul that's implied. And it seems like we're both continuing to bring it in our own particular way to this conversation. So I'm good.
All right.
Can we just briefly take a look at In the Thick of It. And that's the next chapter here. All of these are very brief chapters this time. And this one is finally where Mark Nepo really starts to speak about the larger global and existential level predicaments that we find ourselves facing.
Yeah, this was a good chapter.
Yeah.
There was one statement in there, I'll say in a minute, that I didn't really, does not resonate with me.
Yeah.
But and it was the statement that said, the pain of needless suffering will always be with us. I think as long as we are separated from reality, as long as we're separated from our soul, as long as we don't live in the spirit, as long as we are in that mode, we will experience pain, because pain is the teacher that shows us what the separation is and leads us towards more unity and more oneness.
Okay.
So as long as he's correct, as long as we live in a separated consciousness, then we will experience the pain. And he's correct there. I don't believe that that is necessarily true once you achieve a certain level of consciousness.
Yeah.
And which is where I think we all need to be heading, but we can get to that a little later too. So, but there were a couple things that I wanted to mention. It says, all things are not fair or just, but all things are true. It's just our way of looking at things. We don't think it's fair or just, but it is true. It is happening. It is what it is. Doesn't mean it's only right or wrong in our minds. So, and when we choose love over fear, what type of love are we choosing? Are we talking about? We're talking about the love of each other, the love of nature, the love of consciousness, the love that comes with unity. What are we exactly talking about right there when we're talking about that love? And then he's got that quote on page 183 about incarnation that says that, I won't read the quote, but it just goes to my point that I've said before, that this is why reincarnation is required, because most people don't learn the truth of incarnation in their single lifetime, but they have to learn the truth of incarnation. So they have to be reincarnated to go through and complete the process of whatever stage it is that they're going to go through at that time until they can go to the next one. So, and he had some questions at the end down there, and in the questions said, describe your own struggle between love and fear. And I just made some notes that said that to me, that society is fearful of domination by a few. They are fearful of ending up on the short end of the stick, as they see others already there. They're fearful of dying in pain, as they see others have experienced. They're fearful of their status quo. They're fearful that their status quo is not quo enough uh, and that things could change for the worst, like they have seen it happen to many other people. This is where their fears are coming from. And it's mostly subconscious, and then in some of the next things we'll get to, they'll in the next chapters, we'll be talking about how we just kind of ignore those things and go about our daily lives, putting our head in the sand like the ostrich and just ignoring them. But they're there and they're affecting us. And anyway, those are the kind of notes I had on In the Thick of It.
All right. I'd like to just go back to one of the first things that you just mentioned about this chapter, about a kind of an aspirational state or level that our consciousness might get to. And I think if I'm hearing you right from before when you were describing it, there was a level of consciousness and a level of inclusion and a level of compassion, a level of oneness that seemed to be implied in that horrific story of seeing, waking up in the morning and walking out and seeing the boy hanging dead from the tree, and to be able to include that. Forget the exact phrase that he used about it, but it was basically, where's God?
Yeah, the other guy said, "Where's God?
Where's God here with
And
this
he's
hanging
dead."
boy in the dawn light? Where's God now?
Yeah,
And of course, the response
he's
is in the boy hanging.
right.
And to me, that's just that interaction, that brief exchange of few words, seems to point right at that advanced level of consciousness that you were saying. We'll talk about that later, or that's kind of out ahead of this part of the conversation, but I think he's really making that aspirational state of consciousness vivid in just a brief interaction between the two people.
There have been statements by people throughout history that have indicated that kind of thing, where you see something just gross and totally tear jerking, or
Mhm.
where you withdraw and reserve back from the evil that's there, to still understand that it's real and there's nothing that's not God. So you can't, even evil from a separated point of view, which most of us live in, seems like it's just something that we are not. But it is. It's true. It's there. And if everything's part of God,
Yeah.
it's just like that boy hanging dead. Uh, God is there. We just are not to the point that we can experience that, identify with that, understand that yet.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think the last thing I'd like to say about this In the Thick of It chapter, again, where this is as close as Mark Nepo has gotten yet in this book, to really naming some of the existential and global and huge predicaments we've got going on. It's kind of odd. In one sentence, just right at the beginning, all things are true. All things are not fair or just, but all things are true. Okay. Uh, and then just a few paragraphs later, he says, only a life of truth and compassion can begin to realize the meaning that subsumes this painful moment. Only a life of truth and compassion can begin to release the meaning that subsumes this painful moment. And why I'm putting these two things together is I think we're our biggest pandemic yet, the biggest pandemic we've ever had to face is right now, making the other one that we just went through small by comparison, is that we've lost our contact. We've lost a baseline with which we can establish truth. And without that truth, we don't have the ability. We don't have a baseline in which we can create compassion, in which we can see accurately in our world. You know, one of the craziest and most corrosive things we've ever done is that we've annihilated truth and our relationship with truth. And so we are crippled in the way of these advanced, what's the word I'm looking for? Spiritual states, you know, these activated states of advanced consciousness. That you can't get there if we have knocked out the foundation of speaking the truth. So that's just something I wanted to put out there. And if it sparks you to say anything, great. And if not, we could move on to the big chapter.
In human affairs, at the level of separation in which we exist most of the time, even religions and philosophies have tried to steer us towards more moral and ethical kind of ways of being and living and stuff. They also come from the level of separation. And so, even though we need to work towards moral and ethical things, as long as we're separated, the true truth can only be known once you contact your soul and you live in the spirit. And that's at a higher level of mentality, higher level of consciousness than what we go through and live by every day. And so it's still relative. And that's why if we can get to the point where we can live that way, live by our soul, live by the truth that it tells us, we don't have to be lonely anymore. We know what the truth is for us at that point. We don't have to fear anymore. And we can do God's work. So that's kind of pulling together everything that I kind of look at when I'm thinking about truth and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't tell anybody, and this is what we were talking about, back in the restorative nature of belief. If you're not living that truth, then you are living a separation existence.
Right.
And if you have a faith or a belief, it is somebody else's because you haven't experienced it.
Right.
You don't identify with it. So that all comes together here. He is following these chapters right along and integrating what's before in each one as he goes along too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's really put together real well. This is a good book.
Yeah, I agree. I would just take one last step further. Not only are we not living our own beliefs, you know, because you were pointing back to that little chapter, we're actually, to the degree we're conscious of it, we're living a lie. We are lying. We are creating and living lies and teaching our children to live a lie. And I I may become quite unpopular for saying that and asserting it so boldly, but I just can't not say that now. Because I mean, look at this world. Look at what we're doing. Take any issue and then let's just take it apart and look at where is the truth? Where is the integrity? So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there to add a little spice.
I like the word hypocritical.
Okay, great. Great.
Yeah, I mean, we're being hypocritical to ourselves.
Yes.
You always have that saying that you can't recognize something in somebody else unless you already have it in you. It's like if I see hypocrisy out there, that's because I understand what it is in myself. I may not acknowledge it, I may not like it, I may deny it, but I understand that I have hypocrisy, and so I can recognize that in other places. And that's the level that we all exist on right now. If we're not living the truth that is experienced and felt and identified, then we are being hypocritical to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how it is. I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
it's how it is.
Yeah. We could literally just do this conversation right here, this thread for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, because this underpins how we have become a self-terminating culture. If I just slow it down again one more time and I slow it down and think, we are a self-terminating culture midway in the process of collapse. We're in it.
Yes.
We're in the midstream
Yes.
of our own self-terminating actions.
And it's not that if we look at it, that the culture and the society as we have developed it through the separation and the ego is not sustainable and therefore has to go extinct. That's a law in nature. If you reach into the petri dish, there ain't nowhere to go. You're heading out the door. Everything will go extinct. Humans will go extinct before this planet is absorbed by the sun.
Oh, long before that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Long before that.
Yeah. Even if everything went perfect, that would happen. So yeah, that's just kind of a law. So
Yeah. All right. Well, are you ready to go to the perennial choices?
yeah, let me
Right
make
to the
one
center of our
statement
little
about
reading list for the week and disregarding all the rest of them afterwards?
yeah. Let me make you started off this morning by saying you didn't understand how all of this craziness, got to this point or something. And it's kind of like it needed to, you know. To me, it's almost like it needed to go there so that we could understand what to not to do in the future. I mean, I'm one
Sorry,
of the
Dave.
people. I don't believe that humanity is going to go extinct. I think
Yeah.
that major reduction in population. We've
Yeah.
reached the end of our petri dish, but at least we're smarter than a virus, I would think.
Well, maybe.
Maybe. Uh, but it's a lesson that we could teach coming generations. This is history. This is what happened. And this is why we can't be this way anymore. We can't be exponential anymore. We can't find unlimited sources of energy to extrapolate everything that happens. and get out of whack and hit the edge of the petri dish before we realized we were doing that. So I think we got to go through it. It's just we got to go through it. Now how it's going to end up, I don't know, but I think it's necessary. But anyway, sorry. Now we can get the perennial choices. Sorry about that. I lost your audio. Did you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I had just turned off my microphone to cough, so I'm back. And I was just saying, in as I was getting ready to introduce the perennial choices chapter that we both want to focus on, that Judy, if you're watching this recording, I hope you haven't left, because Bob and I have gone on such bizarre threads in these past couple of chapters, but I doubt that that's so. You seem to have an immense capacity to listen to guys like Bob and me blather on and wait patiently to be able to tell us something that's really worth listening to in your inimicable style. So here we are at the perennial choices. And he starts out with a quote from Llewellyn Vaughan Lee: generosity may be more valuable than stockpiling food. Kindness to others more potent than force. These values will determine what world we create, what is born from the ruins. Those might be the ruins you were just talking about, Bob.
They are exactly what I was just talking about.
You want to start us out? What do you got? What got your attention here?
Just related to that first quote, I wrote a note that said, what will be born from the ruins of global industrial civilization's collapse? I don't know. But if it is guided by kindness and generosity and empathy, it will be a good start. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is.
Yes.
That's why it's got to collapse, and we've got to learn from that, mm-hmm, so that we don't do it again. And if we're guided by kindness, generosity, empathy, those kind of things, tolerance, and if that's what we teach our kids, then that'll be a damn good start to whatever's going to happen from there on. Mm-hmm.
So I got to say, he hands us a number of incidents, a number of examples of lessons we might be faced with in daily life as small personal examples of what he's calling these perennial choices. So he's pointing at really big, life altering choices, but he's also bringing it down to so it's really accessible. We've all had the frustration of being in a traffic jam, and there's the people who zoom along the shoulder of the road, hoping to get ahead of this slowdown in traffic and somehow get in front of the 50 other cars or whatever. And the frustration that can happen with that, like, how many of us have wanted to just get out of the car and go lecture the guy, like, what's wrong with you? So I don't know if any of these little examples, if you have any comments about any of them, if any of them rang your bell in any way, but he does spend a couple of pages talking about them. Any of them got your attention?
All of them.
Okay, great. What do you got?
I made a note that said global industrial civilization is not, quoting him, self-organizing for the common good. It's organized to help itself and to help those that control it. And when he talks about, at the most fundamental level, self-interest and the common good are one and the same. So I just had a note that said American extreme individualism requires people to be fearful because individualists cannot rely on anything but themselves. And they instinctively know that that style of self-reliance is not supported by unity, kindness, generosity, empathy, tolerance. And most, by definition, will be highly competitive with the zero-sum mentality. So American individualism has exacerbated the separation way that humans have been living for millennial now. I don't know how long, since the fall, so to speak, the fall from grace, or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Speak. But American individualism has just made it worse.
Yeah.
And,
You know,
so what do you got to comment about that?
the one phrase you used at the end of what you quoted is zero sum. And I think that that combination of our the illusion of separation that we've now just been branded into our soma, into our bodies. You know, we've just, that's what we learn coming out of the womb. And what we're saturated in for our entire lifetime is how separate we are from everybody. Add to that the dynamic of the, you know, the economy and how that is also the way that humans operate. We just made it up that this is how we operate in an economic model. We're not human beings, we're consumers, we're producers, or we're profiteers, or we're, you know, you get the idea. And that zero sum pressure is so twisted. It so twists our relatedness with one another. We have no choice but to be hyper competitive and paranoid on top of it. And the powers that be are very, very clear. Starting back with Edward Bernays, at least, and all the way through the 20th century, where it's become just this gigantic industry and part of every kind of influence that we can imagine. All the corporations are using it, all the governments are using it, and the it is, how do we influence public processing, public thinking, public perception is, and so we are manipulated intricately from birth all the way through school, all the way through all of our choices as we're out in the marketplace, and how we interact with our workplace, and on it goes. We are cultivated in and then molded into a particular way of conforming to this way of thinking, way of operating that is conducive to being a compliant citizen and to being a productive purchasing consumer. And that's who we are long before we're any kind of an individual with some sort of cool soul and spirit and individual creativity.
We're a cog in the wheel. We're the cog in the wheel of consumption and enterprise and zero sum mentality and individualism. But that's not who we are individually. And that's why I like that quote. He said, at the most fundamental level, self-interest and common good are one and the same. So it's not wrong in my mind to be doing what I think most of humanity needs to be doing now, spending half of their waking hours concentrating on their self-interest as far as their soul work goes, as far as their identifying and living in oneness goes, not profiteering. That's not what he meant at all. And if people read that way, that's a wrong reading of that. But that's why I think people ought to spend half of their waking hours in meditation or prayer or some reading things that'll draw them into them and have them find out who they really are and touch their soul and live from there. That can make a big change in the world. That can bring enough critical mass together to bring an evolution of whatever's supposed to come next.
I'm sorry, could you say it again? What is it that is possible that could bring on that change?
If we find out and live by our soul, by the spirit, and find our purpose in life. If there's enough people that do that, that can create a critical enough mass that an evolutionary push can come about. I've heard in different venues that, anywhere from 30 to 35% of a population or a group or something experiences something, has a mindset about something, and then a critical mass is reached and something evolves from that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's kind of what I meant, was just people spending the self-interest is not for profiteering, it's for making you become closer to your soul, closer to finding God's purpose for you. That's
okay.
Self-interest.
Do you mind if I play devil's advocate for a minute?
Sure, please.
So I love that you pointed out that sentence, how do we begin to teach each other that at the most fundamental level, self-interest and the common good are one and the same. And I think that how we do that is how we need to start that is to acknowledge that the common good doesn't exist in our global culture. The common good is non-existent and is not welcome. Common good is not in the vernacular of the corporatized, industrialized presence that then controls the government. It's just,
you're correct.
Common good is just non-existent.
If that's right, but if we did have a common good, we wouldn't have the mess we're in.
Yes.
Common good is the goal. It's just been bastardized. It's been taken over, and it's been regurgitated as this is the way it should be, under some guise of whatever you want to say our civilization is right now. So yeah, you're exactly right that is the way it exists, and that's the way it operates. You're perfectly good there. But
okay.
Just like I said, self-interest is not for profit. Common good is not for individuals. It is whatever the common good is.
Okay.
Down deep below the surface of the operating system.
Yeah.
As to what it should be.
Yeah. We're right in the neighborhood right now of where I was when I was coming up with the title for my book. 2017 put out the book, The Impossible Conversation, because I had done some amount of corporate consulting, corporate training and so on with executives, and been in the course room or in a coaching setting with a lot of different corporate people over, a couple decades. And I was coming at how to title this book, which is full of what we would now call doom scrolling and like, oh my God, this is what's actually going on. How do we be in the face of this level of corruption and corrosion? And I just got to say that because we are so immersed in this, I I think this is one of the weaker spots for my understanding of where Mark Nepo is coming from. And if I had to make a judgment about it, I think that Mark Nepo just hasn't been in the corporate um, setting for long enough to really get how unbelievably pervasive this is. This is what's creating all the policies for around the world for how we're going to pursue resources, who gets to go for those resources, who profits from what, who has real control of government, and so on. These things are immensely powerful, and it's I'm left with it. It's just a little pie in the sky to think that there's some sort of new thinking that we can come up with on the individual or even the small community level that will make any impact whatsoever. So this is my kind of I promise this is my most negative part of my comments for today, and I'll stop making it real soon. And we don't have to stay in this nosedive. But I also just needed to name the powers that have destroyed the notion of a commons or the common good, either one. Those powers are immensely powerful, immensely powerful.
That's why they have to collapse. They cannot be
I'm with you.
reformed,
Yeah.
not be reformed.
Mhm.
That has to go away. And whatever comes out of the ruins of that has to be, like he talked about, governed by compassion and tolerance and empathy and kindness. If it's
Yes.
not, you're down the same road again. It's
Right.
just a matter of time.
Right. And while I just promised that I was going to pull out of the nosedive, I do want to just quote what he quotes to really, set this in stone of like, oh man, we have some negative trends going on that have been going on for a while. If I could just read this one paragraph, as the potter Susan McHenry said, the viral pandemic revealed a social pandemic that has been festering for decades, and technology has only exacerbated the ways in which we interact and communicate. We're more isolated and, because of that, less trusting. In our modern global culture, we have become more hidden and more evasive of the full range of our feelings. I got to say that that's pretty dang close to the center of what I've tried to create in this body of work. Behind the book club, behind the Poetry of Predicament podcast, behind the Safe Circle meetings, there's this whole body of work of like, how can we reclaim center? How can we reclaim any kind of agency in our life in the face of these huge forces, and how far down we've slid together? And especially that last phrase, in our modern global culture, we have become more hidden and more evasive of the full range of our feelings. We have a culture in which relationship is so stunted. The pain body of relationship in our especially in the USA is just horrific. We aren't able to relate anymore, and that comes from a disconnection from our own feeling body on an individual level. And I've seen this throughout thousands of people that I've had the privilege of working with. We are a stunted, a deeply stunted culture.
I think that's why you emphasize on and on and on, and you should, the embodied feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because what that means is what you're accepting what you experience. And if you're not coming from there, then you're living somebody else's thoughts patterns, whatever.
Yep.
I had 3 quotes related to technology there that I
Great.
wrote. The first one to set up this, because it gets back to the last part of what you were just saying, is that wonderful quote by Krishnamurti. It says, "It's no measure of health to be adjusted to profoundly sick society."
You got it.
And as we are living that separateness, as we're living that separateness from each other and life and nature and the rest of existence, we're trying to survive in a profoundly sick society,
Yep.
and that is just emotionally destructive to try and do that. It's the only way we know how to be, except to the point that, and in my next quote, he says, "An ancient law of consciousness, quote, stop feeling and you stop seeing." If you stop feeling, you stop embodying the experience and the truth that's around that, that is surrounded by that. You stop seeing the truth. You start seeing the separateness. You start seeing the way that everybody else is telling you to see. You're not. I can imagine when I first read that there was this ancient humanoid hundreds of thousands of years ago, maybe even before language came out, that everything was feeling and embodiment and experience. And that's how they saw the world. That's the truth that they see.
Hey, Bob, where is that last quote? I'm trying to find you.
Let me see if I highlighted it. It's right.
Is it somewhere in the vicinity of that?
Yes, the very top line of page 188.
I don't have page numbers where I am, so.
Oh, okay.
Where is it in relation to that?
You see where did you see where the Krishnamurti quote was?
Yes.
The paragraph above that. At the end of that paragraph above that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's the one about not being able to see because we're in a hell that is about not being able to have tears, not be able to blink. This is the indicative. This is indicative of an ancient law of consciousness. Stop feeling and you stop seeing. Yes, I'm with you. That again is just so core. That's like it was built into the backdrop of what's behind this work.
Right.
If we're not feeling, if we're not seeing, and we're disconnected, there is no choice but for us to be cut off from others and actually to start living out violence. There's literally like no other choice.
And to tighten that up a little bit, you were talking a while ago about even asking some friends to come and do this book review because it's so wonderful, a book review. And they said, well, he's a poet, I'm not going to do it, whatever. But the point being is that we can only be so connected as what digitally is produced on our screens. You know, I can't touch you. I can't get the feeling of your embodiment
Mhm.
by being there with you. And so, even with the best of things laid out and done correctly, this medium is only going to be so good. Just, it's not going to be able to get beyond and equal to one-on-one personal physical relationships with people. And as the world collapses and we feel like we've got to get into more resilience and learn from our mistakes and be in communities that care about each other, if there's no more internet, if there's no more none of that, then we're going to be with those people one-on-one physically. And that's where the trust has to come in. And that's where the embodiment of the feelings will be there, where it's hard for us to do that embodiment, feel that experience, that embodiment of the experience and the feelings over a digital medium, which leads to my next quote. It's not really a quote, it was just how I thought about what he had said. Technology has only hidden our full range of emotions and feelings, as it keeps us isolated from physical contact with each other. The more we rely on technology, the more we rely on other things than the physical contact, the one-on-one relationships, the more that the non-embodiment and the non-feeling of the emotions is going to prevail. It's built into the technology itself. We have to get past that. And that's why, I don't have a group here that I meet with and that I join with and that we can converse with and stuff about these things. I wish I did, because then you can get beyond and you can have a further and a deeper dimension than we can possibly have over an internet connection. And that's how I think I see us, and a lot of other people see it that way also. I didn't come up with this. That's how it's going to, small groups all over the world, maybe, totally only a small percentage of what the human population is now, living resiliently and sustainably will be the future. How much of the technology and all that kind of stuff that we retain and can use that doesn't get us extrapolated out of hand with consumption is a different story. I have no idea about that, but we need that one-on-one personal physical connections, and we can only get so far in the digital medium. I lost you again. You were coughing, I guess. Dean,
Sorry.
you were coughing again, huh?
I was coughing again. Sorry. So I hear what you're saying, and I don't know how to do it any different than we're doing it now with the Zoom thing, because it's as good as it gets right now for
That's
a
right.
lot of different reasons. So well, let's keep giving it the best we got, and until we come up with something that's gonna really do it well. I'd like to mention, excuse me, a couple of other things. There's this one phrase, and I don't know where we want to take it or if we want to take it anywhere at all, but he just says it really clearly. There are two base forms of evil: deliberately and knowingly perpetrating harm and being so dissociated from life that cruelty is found acceptable.
That is the definition of what's going on in Gaza right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's really, when you think about it, it's what's going on around the world, and what is assuring our demise. It is assuring our self-terminating nature. It's the kind of thing that justifies, we now normalized 30 years of conference of the parties meetings about the environment, about climate change, and about all these things that are supposed to happen in order to avoid disaster, blah, blah, blah. 30 years. And all we've done is intensify and accelerate our use of and production of fossil fuels and their emissions. And what that tells me is that that is part of a controlled narrative that was designed to produce exactly that result. And how that result gets produced is that we get enculturated into that being acceptable, everything about it being acceptable. To, you're probably tired of me mentioning this thing from the beginning of last COP. There was a press release from a number of oil companies and governments that basically said, we are no longer going to even pretend to have any intention of reducing fossil fuel use. So we're just, don't count on it. Don't look for it. We're not engaged that way anymore. So I'm going to just say it again. There are two base forms of evil: deliberately and knowingly perpetrating harm. That is absolutely going on in Gaza. And being so dissociated from life that cruelty is found acceptable. That also is going on in Gaza. But both, I believe, are writ large around the world, in larger scale, less obviously violent, but possibly existential level expressions, nonetheless, of our cruelty, of evil. So I'm up for it. I'm up for Mark Nepo's use of the word evil here in this book. And so I'm just curious if you have anything that you'd like to say about that.
He goes on several paragraphs later to, I think, talk about, he says, sadly, the most insidious, get my tongue going this morning. Insidious.
Yeah.
Thank you. I got my tongue going right that way. Sadly, the most insidious form of evil is the self-cruelty that results when we sacralize our avoidance of life.
Bingo.
And I thought that was the second form of evil, because I thought in that first quote, it was a harm and being that I didn't look at that first quote as being the two forms of evil, but that it may have been. But then when he came up with that other statement later on, I said, well, that's his second form of evil, most insidious one.
Mm.
The self-cruelty that results when we sacralize, when we make holy, when we say that is the way it's supposed to be. Avoidance of the truth of the way things are supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
But it's what we know. We're never taught to think about the way that you and I are talking.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have gotten to a point in your life for some reason, at some level of your awakening or something, to be able to engage in something like this, in this kind of conversation.
Yeah. So, Bob, I'm curious. There's one other piece right on this same page that I would like to get at least a couple minutes on before our time is over. I'm going to just read it and then just see if it's a thread that we can just weave into the one we were just on with evil. Very often, evil is the result of transformations not being allowed to take place. When the risk necessary to feel the pain of true experience is denied, the threshold to wholeness is blocked, and that transformational energy is diverted. And I would say something else too, but the focus urgently becomes not feeling the pain of living as we look for the path of least resistance in order to escape the difficulty of living. But when running from life itself, the spiral of our estrangement only deepens. So I think there's plenty to just go back to the first sentence or two. Very often, evil is the result of transformations not being allowed to take place. This is very much my experience. Like the word transformation, I grew up in a number of lineages that had very specific and clear use of the word transformation, and none of them was lightweight. None of them was to be confused with the idea of change. Yeah, I'm going to go through some change in my life. I'm going to change my occupation. I'm going to change my relationship. I'm going to change whatever it is. That's very different than something that's transformative. I've always been guided to have my attention on something at the scale of caterpillar into butterfly. That's transformation. That's like jaw dropping. That's like blow your mind what actually happens inside that chrysalis so that the butterfly actually comes out and the caterpillar went in. Give me a break. That is truly mind snapping. I don't have a clue. I don't even know how a phone works. So, how am I supposed to understand how liminal cells transform themselves into something so exquisite from something kind of so ugly and ravenous? So,
with the same DNA.
right. Yeah.
Now that's the part that's tricky right there. Using the same DNA and you're getting two different outcomes.
Yeah. So let's look at let's get all hopey changey for here for a second. What are the transformations that Mark Nepo is pointing at that are being not being allowed to take place? That if they were being allowed to take place, we would be on a different track. What's he talking about?
He's talking about whatever is anti-individualism, whatever is the collective, whatever is the true humanity that we're supposed to be achieving instead of the kind that we've made up and defined and live for ourselves. That's wrong and is destroying our civilization and much of the planet, life on the planet. It's getting back to that self-interest, the soul searching, the soul finding of the soul, finding of your purpose that is transformative, and the knowledge you will gain from there can then become a collectivity of like-minded souls that can exist resiliently and sustainably on the planet.
Okay.
That's one level of transformation.
Can I try another way of saying that same thing and see if it fits with what you just said?
Yeah, see if your empathy listening is up to date or not. So
okay. I'm wondering if it would work to just use some different words and just see how they compare, how they blend. one transformation that Mark Nepo might be talking about that is not being allowed to take place is for each person to be able to discern and reclaim their own sense of center in their own body, the place where they live, the different bodies, the different aspects of themselves, each centered and each lining up. There becomes a coherence in my body, in the wholeness of me. The coherence in me is a sovereignty. It is an agency, a sense of agency at some scale that I don't get when I don't have that center going on. So there's that reclaiming center at the individual level. And then if you and I are coming together and we both have taken on that practice of bringing ourselves back to center and coherence in our system, in our body, we bring two or more of us together in a circle who are committed to presencing that kind of coherence, then we have a collective coherence. That circle has a collective coherence. And this is certainly not anything I've made up. You know, there are a number of traditions and a number of folks have been doing this for a long time. Somebody who's doing it at scale these days, who's pretty visible, is a guy named Thomas Hubel, doing trauma healing by inviting people to find that coherence in their own bodies and then bring that coherence to a circle of others so that there's a collective coherence. And in that coherence that is shared between people, it is possible to create an environment of truly trauma healing, healing of anybody who's in that circle, or healing outside of that circle, other people in other places, and people from our past. They're talking about intergenerational healing. So remarkable levels, truly transformation. That's got my attention because it's very much my experience out of doing the work that I've done for about 30 years now, doing group work, that kind of shared coherence. Amazing things can happen that don't make sense out of the usual way we see our world.
That is a transformation that you're not being allowed
Right.
to pursue.
Yes.
On purpose, by propaganda,
Yep.
by keeping you separated from
And
yourself
off center.
and from other people in a cohesive manner.
Mm-hmm.
They can control you that way. If you know your soul, if you know your centeredness, if you stay there and don't let them pull you out,
Mm-hmm.
where the only trickle down is actual bullshit, then they can't control you if you're there. If you're centered, if you're cohesion among yourself and with others, they can't control you. You may have to still live within their system, so to speak. You may have to go to their grocery store still and get their fuel or whatever it is to exist and survive. But they cannot control you. They can put you in that concentration camp and they can take your life, but they can't take your soul.
So I think those are good words. And I'm sorry, I'm going to slip back into the kind of cynical curmudgeon thing for a second here. um, I'm really struck by the power of his words. This is like no other chapter in this book, and this is like no other poem I've ever read from him. These couple of pages that we've been on for like 20 minutes now, I could just stay with these words, and I can find value, and I can find transformation, and I can find coherence at a massive scale over a year or two just in these 2 pages. And I just want to say one more time this quote that I think you started us on a little while back. Sadly, the most insidious form of evil is the self-cruelty that results when we sacralize, when we make sacred our avoidance of life. So I don't think they're going to need uh, concentration camps this time. I think they've got us. They've got us in our own concentration camp in which we are just delusional, thinking we have choice, thinking we have agency because we can choose which app to bring up on our phone this minute.
They got you exactly where they want you.
Yeah.
They got you believing the way they want you to believe, that you are free when you're not free.
Yeah. So one thing that so here's how we only got like a minute left here. And so I'm going to pull out of the nosedive by quoting the next thing. Like it or not, we are continually challenged to practice staying real. This requires us to keep shedding what is false from year to year, self to self. If we can't, while in war, imagine peace, can't, while confused, imagine confidence, can't, while in fear, imagine safety, can't, while falling, imagine rising, we will lose all sense of hope, which more than a wanted outcome is the assurance that we are part of a lasting life force larger than any one person.
And that larger life force, at its vital best, community is where we learn to put the common good ahead of our selfishness, to put connection ahead of isolation, and to put feeling ahead of hiddenness. Otherwise, we stall our own development.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Bob, I got to say, just on a personal note, past few months, you came to get your toe in the water for a session or two back, looking at the community of practice, and it didn't work out for timing reasons and so on. But ever since that time, it just seems like there's a whole different level of engagement from you in whether it's Safe Circle or book club or whatever. And I just want to thank you for that. This is a precious kind of conversation here that we've been doing for weeks in this book club. And this chapter may be one of the most influential pieces of writing I have ever read. There is so much truth here. And to be able to explore this with you, and Judy, if you're watching, you are absolutely included in this comment from me here. Just my deep appreciation, a deep bow of respect and appreciation for you both, and for anybody else who's engaged with this in the recordings of book club. I thank us all for engaging, because this is the real deal. This is what I'm very, very sad about, not being able to share in a way that my friends, my associates that I spoke with about this book, and they just didn't get it. And the people who were started out with this and then left, I'm sorry, but it's their loss. This is extraordinary. Just these few pages, we could literally just hand out these few pages to people who were sincere practitioners in this body of work. And this is the kind of thing that could truly transform a life. And I don't say that about every book, about many books at all. There's a small handful that comes anywhere near this power of this one chapter.
I have resources that are equal. And those are the things that I study. I've been studying for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
So this is more colloquial, and people can grasp it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think it is very, very, very important. Word will spread. More people will read this kind of thing, or read him, actually. Uh, and it's kind of like once you put something out into existence, it finds its path to the right people at the right time.
Mhm.
So that's all.
Yeah. So Bob, thank you for this. This has been I'm way more awake now than I was at the beginning of our call. And again, thank you very, very much for the heart and commitment that you bring to this. It's very, very enlivening to share this with you.
That's as far as I got in the reading, so we lucked out.
Okay. All right. Well, to Judy and all the folks watching the recording, have a great week, and be sure to stay up on your reading better than Bob does. And I'll look forward to seeing y'all next Saturday for, I believe it's session 8. All right.